All right, let's talk about note-taking. But not the boring kind. We're going to completely change how you think about it, turning it from just, a chore into one of your most powerful learning tools. This is all about the art of active note-taking.
Okay, be honest. You ever leave a class, look down at your notebook, and it's just full of words, but your brain feels totally empty? It's happened to all of us, right? You've been scribbling away for an hour, but if someone asked you what the lecture was about, crickets. That, my friends, is the classic sign that your note-taking just isn't working for you.
But what if I told you there was a way to fix that? And I'm not talking about a small improvement either. Check this out. Research from UNC Chapel Hill found that by switching to active note-taking, you could boost your comprehension by a whopping 40%. 40%! That's literally the difference between passively hearing the information and actually understanding it. And this right here is the core idea. Your notes shouldn't just be a dusty record of what was said. No, they're the bridge. A bridge you're building, brick by brick, during the lecture itself. A bridge that takes you from just hearing something to truly knowing it.
So how do we actually build that bridge? Well, we've got to start with the foundations. I'm going to show you 3 classic methods. But look, don't think of these as strict, rigid rules you have to follow. Think of them more like tools in a toolkit. You pick the right one for the right job.
All right, let's get a quick lay of the land. First up, you've got the Cornell method. That's kind of your systematic, reliable workhorse, perfect for when you need to review later. Then there's the outline method, the speed demon, great for when info is coming at you fast and in order. And finally, the mind map. That's your creative powerhouse, awesome for brainstorming and connecting ideas. Each one has its own superpower.
Okay, let's dive into the Cornell method. This one's been around since the 50s, developed by a guy named Walter Pock, and there's a reason it stuck around. It's all about the structure. You see, it forces you to engage with your notes after the lecture. You pull out keywords, you write questions in the Q column, and then, this is the magic part, you write a summary at the bottom. You're basically reprocessing the information 3 different times. It's like a built-in study guide on every single page.
Next up is the outline method. This is probably the one you're most familiar with, right? Main point, subpoint, another subpoint. It's super fast, it's clean, and it's absolutely perfect for those lectures that have a really clear linear structure. Think a history class that's going chronologically, or maybe a law lecture laying out a case. And then we have something totally different, the mind map. Forget top to bottom lists. With this, you start in the middle and branch out. It's a much more visual, radiant way of thinking, and a lot of people feel it's way more aligned with how our brains actually work, by making connections. So how's it work? You start with one big idea, right, in the center of the page. Here, for example, we've got the 4 P's of marketing. That's your anchor. Everything else is going to connect back to this one central theme. And from that central hub, you just start drawing your main branches. So, product, price, place, promotion. And you'll notice those little icons, right? That's not just for decoration. Adding little doodles and images is a huge part of mind mapping. It fires up a different part of your brain and really helps lock those ideas into your memory.
But here's where the real magic happens. When you start connecting those branches to each other. Suddenly, you're not just listing facts anymore. You're seeing the relationships. You're seeing how price affects promotion, how place is tied to product. It's an aha moment generator. And get this, studies have actually shown that mind mapping can boost your creative problem-solving skills by up to 35%.
Okay, so we've got our toolkit of methods: Cornell, outline, mind map. Got it. But now I want to pivot a little bit, because it's not just about the how, it's about the why. We're going to talk about a radically different mindset, one that completely changes the whole purpose of taking notes to begin with.
So really, it comes down to 2 competing philosophies. On one hand, you've got what we can call hierarchy-based notes. The goal here is basically transcription, creating a perfect, detailed record that you can go back and study later. But on the other hand, you have flow-based notes, and here the goal is totally different. It's about learning right there in the moment.
Author Scott H. Young puts it perfectly. He says, with flow-based note-taking, your goal isn't transcription, it's learning. I love that. It means you stop acting like a court stenographer, just trying to get every single word down. Instead, you become an active participant, a co-creator of your own understanding, right as it's happening.
So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, for starters, your mission is to learn it once and learn it right the first time. It means you understand that just parroting back what you heard isn't real knowledge. You have to put things in your own words. You have to connect new ideas to things you heard 5 minutes ago. You're basically turning listening from a passive activity into an active, creative one.
All right, so we've talked methods, we've talked mindset. Now for the age-old question, the great debate that rages in every classroom, pen versus keyboard. What's actually better? Well, some recent research might just settle the argument for you.
Let's just look at the numbers. A big meta-analysis pulled together a ton of studies and found a really clear winner. Turns out, about 9.5% of students who write their notes by hand end up with an A. For students who type their notes, that number drops to 6%. Now, that might not sound like a huge gap, but it's statistically significant, and when you're fighting for grades, every edge counts.
Okay, but why? Why would handwriting be better? It comes down to two big ideas. First is something called deeper processing. Because writing by hand is just slower, you can't possibly write down everything. So you're forced to listen, to summarize, and to put things in your own words. You're processing it more deeply. The second reason is dual coding. It's way easier to sketch a little diagram, draw an arrow, or circle something important when you're using a pen. This engages both the verbal and the visual parts of your brain, creating a much stickier memory.
Okay, so we've got the methods, the mindset, and the tools. The big question now is, how do you put all this together? How do you build a system that's perfect for you? Because let me be clear, the goal here is not to just pick one of these methods and use it for everything, forever.
Building your own personal toolkit is all about being smart about it. First, you got to analyze the situation. Is this a super fast-paced lecture, or is it more of a slow, thoughtful discussion? Second, you have to know yourself. Are you a visual learner who would thrive with mind maps? And third, and this is a most important one, experiment, mix and match. In fact, one survey found that over 60% of students are already creating their own hybrid systems, so you're in good company.
Now, I know what some of you are thinking, but handwriting is just too slow. I can't keep up. And that is a totally valid concern. But I've got a pro tip for you that can be a total game changer: abbreviations. Developing your own personal shorthand can seriously boost your writing speed.
And I'm not talking about anything complicated. Look at these examples, using W for with, or BC for because, an asterisk for the most important point, a simple arrow to show that one thing leads to another. Each one of these saves you just a second or two, but they add up, and they let you keep pace with the speaker while still getting all those amazing brain benefits of writing by hand.
So here's the bottom line. The best note-taking system in the world isn't one you're going to find in a textbook or, honestly, even in this explainer. The best system is the one you create for yourself. It's a personalized toolkit that you build and refine over time, one that's perfectly suited to how your brain works and what your classes demand.
So I want to leave you with one final question to think about. What if your notes weren't just a record of the past? What if instead they were the first draft of your future understanding? What if you saw every blank page not as something to fill, but as a workshop to build new ideas? What would you build then?